US Vice President Mike Pence says Washington agrees with the need to establish a safe zone on Turkey's southeastern border. The comments follow his meetings with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and other senior government officials. As part of the agreement, Turkey will establish a 32-kilometer safe zone. The deal entails a ceasefire that will allow a YPG withdrawal. Vice President Pence says Washington will not impose further sanctions on Ankara if it upholds its end of the deal.
Let me say the concessions that the United States made have to do with the fact that the president had made it clear that if there had not been a ceasefire today, there would have been a new round of massive sanctions against Turkey. And you'll see in the agreement that on the basis of the pause of 120 hours, a ceasefire over the next 5 days, that we will not be implementing additional sanctions during that period of time. Once we have a permanent ceasefire, following the orderly withdrawal of all YPG forces, the United States also agreed to withdraw the sanctions that were imposed on several cabinet officials and several agencies earlier this week.
Well, financial columnist Taha Arvas joins me in the studio once again for more analysis on the Erdogan-Pence meeting that was going on in Ankara. Taha, the pictures that we've seen of President Erdogan and the Vice President shaking hands, that was a tense handshake. That did not look like two world leaders who were particularly happy to see each other.
Right. It's been a week of whirlwind discussions and negotiations between Turkey and the United States. Turkey has legitimate concerns. The United States has legitimate concerns. And they went into a meeting, hopefully to iron out the differences. And from the latest from what we're hearing is perhaps they have ironed them out and things might be looking up.
So this meeting went on for longer than we anticipated.
Right.
I mean, more than 4 hours.
Right.
What has come out of it?
The latest that we've heard is that the United States and Turkey have agreed that Turkey had set up to move into northern Syria to evacuate the area of Turkey's alleged PKK terrorists and to allow for the Syrian refugees who had left the areas to be repatriated, to return home. And the United States has agreed for that to proceed and has promised to persuade the YPG PKK terrorists in the area to go back south past the zone of the zone that the United States and Turkey has agreed to, and they have the latest that we've heard out of the meeting is that they've agreed to jointly monitor the area to make sure there's a ceasefire and no more fighting occurs in that area.
So that agreement sounds exactly like the agreement that Turkey put on the table when they said that they were going to launch an operation in northeastern Syria. So why the outcry and this threat of sanctions from the United States?
I'm not convinced that it's necessarily the Trump administration that, the outcry was kind of against the Trump administration. At the G20 summit in Japan, President Trump very clearly articulated what Turkey's concerns were. And I think, and just yesterday he said, that he realizes that there are terrorists in the area and that Turkey's motives were to clear terrorists of the area. He said they aren't angels, et cetera, which are obviously true statements. But I think there was, and he said Lindsey Graham wants to be in the Middle East for the next 1,000 years. There are people who make a lot of money off of war. The military-industrial complex, to quote Trump's words, want us to continue to be at war, he said, and we don't want to be that to be the case. So that's why we withdrew, and hopefully there'll be peace. And if what we're hearing is correct, then that will now happen, and that's great for everyone.
So one of the things, one of the provisos, if they do stick to this agreement, is that the United States will not impose any new sanctions on Turkey. But we had Senator Lindsey Graham tweeting a whole list of new proposed sanctions, including against financial institutions like Halkbank, against the Turkish military. Where does that leave Turkey with regards to this threat of sanctions hanging over its head? The
last statement in that list of sanctions that Lindsey Graham tweeted out was that the President of the United States has the authority to rescind these sanctions if Turkey goes back to the areas that they were in before this incursion happened. Well, that's where we are. If within 5 days, if Turkey does do what that has been negotiated, then that's exactly where we are, and the sanctions go away. And Vice President Pence also said that if that becomes permanent, that ceasefire, then the previous sanctions that were put on Turkey will also be rescinded, and that's great for everyone.
So it looks like maybe both parties have got what they came for
Right,
today.
yes.
Taha Arvas, as always, thank you for your time here on Money Talks.
Thank you.